Whole gang's here. Second pod in as many days because there are things to discuss in the world of the San Diego Padres, and excited to do so with Derek Togerson and Todd Strain after an eventful Wednesday where we got a chance to hear from Bob Melvin, now the manager of the San Francisco Giants.
Boo!
I wonder how much he'll hear that on March 28th. And AJ Preller, who is once again searching for the right manager.
Boo! Everyone gets booed in this episode because nobody looks good here.
No one boos in San Diego. Come on, where are you from?
Oh.
Philly, New York?
I was just watching the NLCS in Philly, so yeah, I think I'm probably on a booing kick.
You look good, Derek. Todd, you look good as well. And
keep up, Darnay.
I'll do my best. Before we get going, thanks to OG's, sponsored the On Friar podcast for over 30 years. OG's has been crafting award-winning microbrews with over 60 medals in international, national, and regional competitions. OG's, one of the most decorated breweries in the world, with each OG's location having 12 proprietary OG's beers on tap. They're constantly updating their menu as they did this year with new items like the Mediterranean Salmon Bowl, a couple specialty pizzas, buffalo cauliflower, a Nashville hot chicken sandwich. You can take advantage of OG's loyalty program. It's super easy. You can do it online and earn loyalty points, rewards, and exclusive offers, all of which leads to fun and free food. And ordering online from OG's is easier than ever. You can get OG's straight to your door. And who doesn't like that? All right, first things first, before we get going, the walk-up music. All right, our regularly scheduled Thursday episode of the On Friar podcast. If you haven't caught up this week, Todd and I got together on Tuesday after news broke that Bob Melvin, headed to the San Francisco Giants. And as we mentioned, Wednesday had a chance to hear from both he and AJ Preller. Bob Preller and AJ Melvin. You know, if that were the case, they'd still be together. But those two didn't sync up quite as well as we thought they might. And so here we go again. And we will hear from both those guys, kind of the clip that stood out from Bob Melvin on a day where he didn't really want to discuss the Padres situation too much, and then some of what AJ Preller had to say, and some interesting reaction from one Ken Rosenthal. I don't know if you guys got that clip, but we'll show that as well. He was on a podcast and pretty fired up about the situation. So we'll bounce around a little bit.
More organizational malpractice from Ken.
Yeah. I don't know if he used the word dysfunction, but you got the sense that that was on his mind. But Derek, we'll start with you because Todd and I had a chance to at least react to initially the news on Tuesday. Haven't had a chance to get with you quite yet. What's on your mind? What's jumped out to you in the last 48 hours since everything became real?
Well, like I said, nobody looks good here. Nobody did this right. We're learning more and more how little AJ actually says that is true. We're learning more and more that that Bob really was trying to get out of here as much as he possibly could, leaving a job undone, which I don't know how much I can or even want to blame him for this. You know, like if you get to a certain point in your career, if you're not happy somewhere, you go somewhere else, right? If you don't think you're going to be able to be made happy somewhere, then you go look for something else. I can't begrudge a man for doing that. It does kind of hurt that, you know, these players that have put so much into him, like he's leaving them behind when they were, you know, I'm sure a couple of free agents probably signed here because of Bob Melvin and wanted to have him around. But it almost reminds me of, like, you know, being a collegiate athlete where you go somewhere and then the coach takes off from mid-major to go to a Power 5 school. Well, now, you know, in the days before the transfer portal, you're kind of stuck. You have to stay at Jackson State. You can't follow Deion Sanders. You know, it's almost like you're just kind of leaving your crew behind. And that I think sucks. But again, can you blame him for wanting to make his have a better quality of life in a spot where he thinks he can actually do something the way that he feels like he deserved to do it? You know, I mean, very few guys have won more baseball games in Major League Baseball right now than Bob Melvin has. He's earned that right to write that ticket. So how much do you put on him? How much do you put on AJ? I don't know. I would love to know just how overbearing AJ is in a day-to-day situation. Because we're not in that building in that situation. We don't know. I want to know how much he's down there and just putting his finger on things, saying, you will do this, you will do it this way, you will do it like this. I don't care if you want this information. We're giving you this information because we feel like our information is better than the information you want. I don't know. What I'm hoping for is we quickly try to turn the page and move forward is we get a seasoned manager who knows how to work with the kind of information that AJ is just hell-bent and stubborn enough to try and give him. Somehow this has to work some way, right?
Maybe.
We think and hope it has to work, but still waiting. What about you, Todd? What jumped out to you from what we heard on Wednesday?
Well, what jumps out to me is that there's one side in this relationship where everyone who leaves this particular person leaves on bad terms or with a bad taste or it went south. And that's 9 years of this now. So whether you side with Melvin or Preller, there's blame, obviously, that goes both ways. But one person has a long track record in Major League Baseball and has respectfully left each organization he's either played for or worked for. And the other one, seemingly every time there's a parting, it's on bad terms and they're coming fast and furious. So, and my big takeaway is still the same one that I harped on the other time. Nobody leaves a job where you have a star-studded roster, you have a fan base that packs your ballpark and absolutely supports the team 100%, and you have an ownership that, even though they're trimming salary, is still going to be among the highest in baseball. Nobody leaves that job unless it's terrible working environment and you are not at all on any sort of friendly terms with your boss. Nobody leaves that job.
It almost feels like the Chargers organization doesn't know how to part with superstars, right? LT left on bad terms. Kellen Winslow left on bad terms. Dan Fouts left on bad terms. The list, Antonio Gates more or less just kind of said, you can go see the door now. It's a lot of their greatest players. They've just kind of either walked away or actively pushed out the door. And it's like the Padres doing the same thing. You notice what you were saying, Todd. It's like this. Can anybody leave here with a good taste in their mouth? Can it be an amicable? Can people look back and say, I loved my time in the Padres organization? They always say they love their time in the city of San Diego and they love their time with the players and some of the coaches, but nobody, I can't think of any. I'm sure it's probably happened. I can't think of any off the top of my head who were like, yeah, you know what? That front office, that was awesome. Great experience. Yeah. 5-star, would subscribe. Like I don't get any of that from anybody.
And real quick, Darnay, like people move in baseball. You shift organizations. There's a difference of philosophy at some point. But it doesn't just break completely. For most of these guys, they bounce from organization to organization. They maintain relationships, whether it be speaking or friendly. As Derek said, when people leave the Padres, it's like the worst divorce ever, and no one wants to talk to each other. And as we've seen with Skip Schumacher, there's a lot of things that are being said that are kind of veiled. Here's what it was like. It's really weird.
That was the perfect segue, Todd, because that's exactly where I was going. Because Skip Schumacher did get a lot of people's attention when he was on with Dan Le Batard and spoke about the environment in Miami and how he'd worked at places previously where guys were angling for each other's jobs and it didn't seem super healthy. And everybody just assumed that he was talking about the Padres because the only other place he'd been at was St. Louis, and you don't necessarily get the sense that that's what goes on there. And when he was here with, at least at the end, Jace Tingler, and obviously the fit didn't seem great with Bobby Dickerson and Wayne Kirby, and so there appeared to be kind of some sort of power struggle there. I did, when Miami was here, I believe in September, I asked Skip about his time here. And, I wasn't too pointed about what he'd said before, but kind of left it open ended. And, as you'd expect Skip would do, I mean, only had good things to say. And obviously the appreciation for AJ Preller and the opportunity that he gave him and all that. And so, I don't know what to make of that. Maybe, he's here, doesn't want to ruffle any feathers, say too much. Maybe what he said to Levitard was closer to the truth. I don't know. But, it's interesting now because Skip is one of those guys that at least the fan base, you hear the name come up and, maybe the whole Kim Ings situation with Miami, somebody he seemed to work well with, they want to hire somebody above her. She leaves. So does that open the door potentially for a reunion with Skip Schumacher? I think that's kind of one of the interesting possibilities now going forward. I think that's mostly speculation at this point, but a name that you would think would potentially be brought up. I don't know.
Yeah, that thing was Skip. Wasn't that from like middle of the season though? It was several months ago, right?
Early, yeah, maybe June or something like that.
Yeah, now it's starting to make the rounds because obviously of what's going on now with the Padres organization.
Well,
but
it made the rounds at the time too, I will say.
Yeah, no, exactly. Now it's kind of getting a second life of its own now. Because I remember the actual incident, and it was. And by the way, Skip did a hell of a job with the Marlins this year. I mean, got them into the playoffs with a negative run differential and a substantially negative run differential. He did a really good job of taking a team that obviously has Sandy Alcantara, who was down and hurt a lot of the year. They traded away Pablo Torres, and they still somehow got them with a terrible offense into the postseason. Skip did a fantastic job. He was on Andy Green's staff for a couple of years, and he was there for both years of Jace Tingler. And I kind of think back to the first time he ever got ejected from a baseball game was when he was associate manager with the Padres. And I'm wondering how much of that had, and by the way, it was in Miami. I wonder how much of that had to do with just sheer frustration bubbling over of other things and not just how terrible the strike zone was. Probably Doug Eddings, but I don't know if that was for sure, but I'm sure we can say it was probably Doug Eddings because he's terrible, or Angel Hernandez or Joe West. So you'd say maybe it was just everything kind of bubbling over at the same time, because he was gone the next year. It's interesting when you hear, because guys, as you said, Todd, this is a small world that they live in. They travel in all the same circles. You never know who you might work with in another place, right? TV business is very much the same way. Like, you don't want to start hanging people out in case you ever have to go and try and work for or with them at some other place again. So for him to say that, that means something, especially in such a small, insular world of, front offices and managerial staffs in Major League Baseball.
Yeah, and it wasn't just Skip. I mean, we know Dave Roberts left on bad terms. Tingler and Preller were buddies. That seems to be a frayed now. Bud Black, as we know, is no fan of what's going on with this organization. And there have been some players that have left that have been like, really? This is how you're going to send me out? So seems to be a theme.
What's wild is was it Dick Monfort ended up being right about the Padres after all. His quote before the season about, I don't know about this roster, might be a little top heavy. And sure enough, Dick was correct about that. What's interesting is, and I just found this out, I don't know if you guys had heard this, but I just Googled Andy Green. Bob Melvin. Yeah, Bob Melvin was in one place for a long time. Andy Green has, since been in the same place since leaving, and now he's getting a chance, as Derek mentioned, to interview for the Guardians job. Jace Tingler been in the same place, not only for a couple years, but been in the same place ever since. There just seems to be one situation where it is a revolving door and guys can't seem to figure out the fit and don't stay here for a very long time. And I think that's especially evident with Bob Melvin, who could have stayed in Oakland until the end of time, probably, if he had decided to do that. But then when he comes here, after 2 years, and sounds like even less than 2 years, he was ready to kind of move on. And there is one common thread through all that. Do you guys?
What would be worse? What would be worse? That Bob Melvin wins a World Series in San Francisco, or Andy Green wins one in Cleveland?
I'm gonna for me, it's Andy Green in Cleveland, man. That would be mind blowing.
I think it's Bob Melvin, because I think Andy Green is easier to write off as young manager, young team. He was set up to fail, right? He was here for the rebuild years. Like he was never expected to win here. He was a sacrificial lamb. Whereas Melvin was expected to win here. You set up with the team. He came close to doing so, and then you ship him off to a division rival. And again, the fact that it'd be the Giants as opposed to an American League team, I think, for a number of reasons, that would cause it to sting. Let's start with Bob Melvin. This was the soundbite that made the rounds, and really the one time he kind of directly addressed the situation in San Diego.
Really don't want to get too much into the San Diego situation other than the fact that I really enjoyed my time there. Some things transpired last year in a difficult year for the team with high expectations. I think there was a narrative at the end that probably wasn't going to go away with me being on my last year of my contract. And I think as far as that organization goes, it's probably not fair if that narrative continued through, next year. So all things considered, this opportunity came about, and, for all the reasons I stated, this feels like the right one for me. But I very much enjoyed my time in San Diego. It just seems like with a lot of things that were popping up there, it just was time to move on.
So that's basically anonymous sources were right. It stinks that it got out, and I now have to go somewhere else because I don't want you jackholes showing up in day one of Peoria and start asking me this and not let it go until AJ and I have our first public blow up. Am I reading that wrong?
No, 100%. And as soon as the Padres have their first 3-game losing streak, the questions are going to be like, you're not working well with Preller. Preller's not working well with you. That would have been the line of questioning and the storyline that would have come up every time throughout the upcoming season if and when the Padres had struggled on top of everything else.
For sure. And yes, it points to the differences being irreconcilable, which is, I believe, a word used in one of Dennis Lynn's pieces. And not something that I think there are different levels to this. I mean, I think the contract part of it, is something. One thing that I don't believe we've heard about is, did Bob Melvin say, hey, I want a longer term commitment? Did AJ Preller, did anybody, was that on the table? Was that discussed by either party? Obviously, they didn't go in that direction. He gets a 3-year deal with the Giants. And so the thought that, Bob Melvin was 3 and done with the Padres, that didn't have to be the case. But it was proof that, there wasn't going to be this meeting like we thought there might be on Monday where everybody comes together and hammers out the plan and kind of figures out a healthy way forward. Like that clearly wasn't possible with these two men. And again, we get so little from either one of them. They're never going to be candid and forthcoming with us. But man, what a world it would be if Tuesday or Wednesday after the season, the two came together for a press conference and they were on the podium at the same time. And they said, yes, we discussed things. Things weren't as good as we wanted them to be. Here's how we're going to handle it going forward. We feel like we're in a good place and we're going to move forward together. That's what healthy, reasonable adults do. That's what happens in relationships. That's what happens in marriages. Now, you don't hold a press conference for a marriage, but clearly they were in a place where that narrative, the frustration, the discontent, they didn't feel like it was fixable. And when you have the perfect kind of plan B for Bob Melvin, maybe it was plan A and a half, it might have been closer to plan A, for him to go back home and go back to a franchise that he played for and watched growing up, that was too enticing to overcome. But man, wouldn't it have been nice to believe that these two guys couldn't have gotten the same page together and worked it out?
Yeah, but that would tell you that again, as you said, they are, healthy, well-adjusted adults. And apparently we're dealing with at least one, probably 1.5 of those. Even if you split us 3/4 for each one, you're dealing with 1.5 of those people here. And when you have the tipping of the scales goes over 1, it's probably not going to be a tenable situation. What I don't know is, I've heard the word hatred thrown around, and that's a strong word, right? Yeah. That's what starts wars, is hate. I don't get along with Brandon Staley. I don't hate Brandon Staley. Like, you can still, what does it take for two people who are allegedly working in the same room, for the same organization toward the same goal to win a championship in San Diego. How does it get to the point where there's hate on either or both sides? Like that is such a massive step that I don't comprehend how that can truly be the case unless there's some stuff that went down that guys we don't know about. One of them's making passes at the other one's wife, or I don't know what's going on that would create that level of distrust and that level of anger between two, again, alleged professional adults who are supposed to be pulling in the same direction. I don't get it. I mean, even Tony Stark and Steve Rogers could come together after they had their knockdown drag out for a greater good. Like, what happened here?
I don't know who Steve Rogers is, but I'll let you continue.
Captain
Todd.
America. Oh my God, you nerd.
I know Tony Stark.
Yeah, and with all this going on, it even speaks to the dysfunction of that decision to try to stay the course. Like, how could they have ever, like, they said they had a great meeting on Monday. That's not, how could they
Just like their meeting last year, Todd. No different.
How could they have ever have come away after those 2 days of the season and decided, let's give it one more try together? That is mind-blowing, knowing what we know now. It's just, it's crazy. It's crazy.
Another thing that kind of came up on both sides was, and I'm sure if you go back to this podcast after Bob Melvin was hired, you know, we were thinking, well, what is Bob Melvin going to do with this talented roster? You know, he never had the assets and the resources that like this in Oakland. And this seems like his opportunity now to get, you know, a top tier team from a talent perspective. And if he's, you know, as much as he drew out of those A's teams, imagine what he's going to draw out of these Padres teams. Maybe Bob Melvin is just kind of more comfortable dealing with the everyman and not dealing with $200-300 million players. And maybe that's a challenge for him that he's just not prepared for or equipped for. I don't know, because it's obviously a different challenge for him. And, you know, you heard about that. You heard about the coaching staff structure, bigger coaching staffs in San Diego than what he had in Oakland, and just kind of more ideas and people, maybe the Don Trickers of the world that he didn't have to deal with in the past. And so that being an issue as well. But there were kind of little glimpses here and there and ideas of how the structure, just the way things are run here, different. Obviously the makeup of the clubhouse and the guys on the roster are different, and that maybe that's just not kind of what Bob Melvin is comfortable kind of dealing with.
Well, have you seen the list of Giants coaches?
And I've heard this come up as well, but go ahead.
I'm looking at their website right now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. There are 16 coaches aside from the manager. This is a massive coach. You got a bullpen catching coach, a pitching coach, director of pitching, the bench infield coach, the assistant hitting coach, director of hitting and assistant hitting coach, the assistant pitching coach, a quality assurance coach, a first base coach, the hitting coach, the third base coach, the major league assistant coach, another major league assistant coach, the bullpen catcher, director of video coaching, and then just regular old assistant coach.
Oh, director of
If
video.
there were too many cooks in the kitchen here, what the hell is he going to do with all that up in the Bay?
It's a great question.
Nothing about this makes sense. Whether you pick a side from AJ Preller's perspective, or you pick Melvin, or what you read into what Melvin says, you go analytics as you just did, coaches and everything like this. Nothing about this makes sense. The only thing that makes sense is these two guys are complete opposites, cannot work together, and the Padres are hopefully in a much better place now that this has been separated between the two, because nothing makes sense. It doesn't make sense.
No, but Darnay, what you said though about the everyman, though, I think that has a lot of merit, because he did get a lot more out of the guys in Oakland before they became superstars, right? When Matt Olson was just coming up, when Josh Donaldson was just coming up, he turns those guys into superstars and then kind of turns them loose and goes on to the next group of youngsters. He's very good with that. And what happened in September when it was the Matt Battens and Jurickson Profars of the world, it was Matt Waldron, they got better. You know, all of a sudden his moves started making more sense. Maybe he's just better equipped for not having superstars, which leads us to the next question. What managers are out there who are great with superstars. Of course, the number one on the list is Dusty Baker. He just announced he's going to be retiring, but I'm wondering if that's just to get out of Houston. And by the way, people retire all the time and come. Dusty's done it twice himself and come back out of retirement. He's had Bonds. He's had all the superstars in Houston. He's had Derek Lee. He's had Bryce Harper. He does well with superstars, Joey Votto in Cincinnati, and he wins quickly everywhere he goes. I doubt he's going to come here and do that. Although, as we talked about on a text thread, he would be perfect for this job,
which is probably would never get it.
Right. Exactly. So who is it? Who's out? Who are the people who are, are good with superstars, are going to be able to handle this, and who are going to be able to get along with and use the kind of info that AJ is going to give them? It's that last part that we really don't know about. But you look at a guy like Craig Counsell, whose contract is going to expire in Milwaukee. Obviously, very good manager. He's had some, the Corbin Burnses of the world in Brandon Woodruff. He's had some all-stars, some big name guys up in Cleveland. Christian Yelich, he's done well with them. Mike Schilt, he had Albert Pujols, Yadi Molina, Adam Wainwright. He had superstars in St. Louis, and they always won when he was there. I don't know what Ryan Flaherty can give you. Give me a name, give me somebody who's out there, and don't say Buck Showalter. He's not coming here. I think he's just so soured on the whole superstar roster thing. He's not going to go to another one of those immediately. Who's out there? Where would you go? Who would you hire to handle something like this?
I mean, he's not necessarily who I would hire, but Joe Girardi's just hanging around, and it didn't work out in Philly on a roster that was pretty talented. I mean, you got Bryce Harper, you got JT Realmuto. This pre-Castellanos. So I believe it was pre-Castellanos. So, but I don't know if he's necessarily that guy. I don't know if it's so, but whether or not they succeed or fail, for me, I think it's more so the information and communication piece than it is handling star players. Handling star players is definitely part of it, but it just seems like the directives, the information, using that information, that's the stuff that seems to rear its ugly head more often. And I don't know if, dealing with star players was more kind of an offshoot of that, or if that was, you know what I mean? What was the big domino? What was the thing that kind of caused things to go sour? I would feel like if they can get the communication and this is how we operate thing down, that might be more crucial than how you handle star players. But I might be completely wrong on that.
Well, one of the reasons that Schilt was, we were told Schilt was let go in St. Louis is because there was a miscommunication between him and the front office, and they had differences of opinion on information. Now, does that mean that makes him a better fit for San Diego because this is the kind of information they were looking to be using, or is it the same kind of thing where he's not going to be a fit here because he doesn't like to use that kind of stuff? What we need to know is what's the information stream, what kind of analytics are they gathering, what are they doing, what are they giving to these skippers, what's important to this organization, and do you have a skipper who knows how to take that information, break it down, and apply it properly?
And also something to keep in mind, you guys mentioned all the likely candidates, but also the pool of candidates, the people that are actually interested in this job, is much smaller than it would be if it was a normal major league manager search, because a lot of people feel like AJ Preller's on his last legs here, and this is an all-in season. And then a lot of people in baseball who would be quite good at this job don't want to come to this job because AJ Preller is involved with this organization.
No, Todd. AJ's getting a lot of people calling him about this job.
Yeah,
very
come on,
popular job.
Very accomplished candidates have reached out.
Come on.
Yeah, now here's the thing. I think all that can be trumped by two things. One, it's freaking San Diego. It's true. I mean, there are worse places to be. And two, everybody needs a job. And there are only 30 major league manager jobs. And if you have a chance to get one, I think unless you are a guy like a Dusty Baker who can write your own ticket and go pretty much anywhere you damn well please, you're going to look hard at taking one unless you have multiple teams offering. If it comes down to Milwaukee, New York, and San Diego, which one are you going to go with? Well, then you can kind of pick and choose whichever one you think is the best situation for you.
Yeah.
Our guy Lauren chiming in as he always does, and I appreciate that. And if you're watching live on the NBC7 YouTube page, get into the chat and we'll show your comments on this episode. Just a reminder that even when AJP had his handpicked guy Tingler, Preller had his fingers / spies / whatnot everywhere and was making demands / changes on the whim. Who would want to deal with that? at all.
Ryan Flaherty would.
Ryan Flaherty probably would deal with that better than most. Real quick on like the analytics stuff, that's what's kind of fuzzy and hard to kind of figure out because, you know, Melvin came from an analytics driven department, organization. There was the soundbite from David Cohn from a podcast, I can't remember which one, that floated around where Melvin told him that he wasn't getting information on like bullpen use and matchups that he had requested, and he wanted this information, he wasn't getting it. But then you hear other things that, you know, Melvin isn't open to the information that they're handing down. Preller kind of touched on that, hinted at that. Kevin Acee in some of his reporting today, you know, keeping some of those folks at arm's length and not really talking to them at a certain point. So it seems like both guys want to use information. They just have their different information sources that they feel strongly about and that they rely on, and couldn't kind of come together.
Surprise. They don't see eye to eye on the information.
Yeah, on a number of things. And let's go to I threw together you know, a series of sound bites from AJ Preller because again, he's not the most forthcoming, so you kind of have to like listen pretty closely and read between the lines to like glean anything from what he says. But there was a trend, I think, from yesterday that came out where he was just talking about fit, and it was just kind of clear that they're looking for a specific type of manager, and Bob Melvin wasn't that type of manager.
To really start focusing on adding a manager that you know, from our standpoint, fits what we're trying to do, fits our team and our clubhouse. I think we're excited to have somebody that, you know, that has that shared vision, that's willing to kind of disagree and then commit, and ultimately, you know, somebody that kind of views winning in the same way that a lot of people in this organization do. You know, getting the right manager, getting somebody in here that, you know, is going to be able to work with the players. And I think the shared vision is an important thing. You know, just constantly talking about how you get better, continuous improvement, and not looking at that as a negative, but a positive. I think that's something that, you know, myself, others in the organization, and the manager need to be on the same page with. From my end, it wasn't about being closed off or anything like that. I think some of it is like, you know, just some different thoughts on philosophy and, you know, what it looks like. We've got to make sure we have somebody that, you know, that like from that standpoint, wanting the best information, wanting to use our resources as an organization, and myself kind of over the top trying to coordinate it all. I think that's something I've got to really focus on to make sure we nail that. And we did at different points in the last couple of years, but, you know, I think as Bob alluded to here, you know, I think he felt it was a little better fit, and I think we've got to find a manager that fits our group and our organization right now.
That was a lot of different points.
Oh my gosh, I felt like I've been in a 100-year nap.
He said a lot of different things there. Is it me, or is the views winning the same way that people in this organization does a little bit damning?
Yeah, maybe a little bit, and not looking at the constant desire to improve as a negative thing, which, you know, you hear rumblings about AJ constant, like, we got to do this, we got to do this, we got to do this.
You got to take more infield in August and when it's humid in St. Louis. Like, no, the skipper's got to have his pulse on the players.
Yeah, if he's like, no, we're good, our guys are good, then you could see how that would be what AJ's trying to communicate there. Like, no, I'm just trying to get better, and like that shouldn't be a negative thing.
But there is overworking. I mean, look, anybody will tell you if you overwork a muscle, it's going to fail on you. If you overwork your employees, they're going to revolt on you. If you overwork your brain, it's going to start missing things. There is such thing as overwork. The problem is nobody knows that line except the people who were doing the work, you know, and then the people who are supposed to trust the people who were doing it. Guys like Manny Machado can go out there every day and grind. Fernando Tatis Jr. can go out there every day and grind. Xander Bogaerts has a wrist issue. He can't go out there every day and grind. He may want to, but it's maybe not the best thing for him because you got to get someone like that healthy. You know, it's weird. It's weird that you can't just go 1 through 26 is what we're going to do. Everyone's got different limits and thresholds and things like that, and how much they can or even should be doing. Some guys you have to rescue from themselves. Some guys Will Myers would overwork himself. You know, you have to sometimes tell them to dial themselves back, and that makes them better. You can't just make blanket statements like that on everyone on a roster because we're all human, we're all unique. We all need to understand where our optimal usage level is.
It's kind of ironic to me that this organization has communication problems over and over again, and we keep getting the message about these communication problems through a fuzzy, terribly connected, dimly lit Zoom from a person who's running the organization, who when he talks, you can interpret his statements multiple ways, and he's not clear and precise and direct, and he waffles and kind of leaves you thinking like, well, who do you mean by that? Or what do you mean? And we're talking about organizational communication issues. Like, what in the world's going on here?
Get that dude a webcam.
Have a press conference, stand at the podium and say what you mean. Say it with conviction. Say, this is what's going on. This is what I want. And this is going to happen, instead of all this other stuff.
So one of my takeaways was, and AJ talks a lot about collaboration, but I think the conclusion I drew from listening to everything yesterday was he might be open to collaboration, other voices, but clearly there's like a way they want things done. And Melvin didn't jive with that. And so this doesn't seem like a situation where an established manager like Melvin comes in and they say, okay, Bob, how do you want to do things? What kind of information do you want? How can we cater the environment around you? It sounds more like they want to get the manager on board with them and how they do things, rather than saying, what worked for you in Oakland, let's bring that here and accommodate you. Derek, you made the analogy to like a college coach or what have you. This work for any coach. Like if you have a quarterback that plays a certain way, how do you structure the offense around that quarterback? Now, you might have your tenets, philosophies, that sort of thing. But if you had Phillip Rivers and then all of a sudden you have Lamar Jackson, like you better change the playbook up to accommodate Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes or Jalen Hurts.
Well, John Harbaugh did that. They went from Joe Flacco.
That's a great point.
To Lamar Jackson. You can never in the history of football find two more polar opposite styles of quarterback than those two guys. So you can't call the same plays for him. Greg Roman had to go, okay, we're going to drop him back and throw the ball 50 yards downfield. Lamar, you got to call a completely different game. They can both be successful. They're not going to be running the same kind of offense. Look what happened when Mike McDaniel got his hands on Tua Tagovailoa. You can't sit there and ask him like Brian Flores did to drop back and just deliver the ball in the pocket, wait for guys to get open, 30 yards downfield. He didn't have the arm strength. He didn't have the mobility. Your line's not good enough. So McDaniel's got him throwing everything inside of 10 yards. And guess what? It works. Yeah. You have to do give people information in the way that they best utilize the information. And that was just not happening here.
No, well said. And there seems to be a rigidity with the way Preller wants things done, and just the inability to kind of adjust to who you have in that chair. And so I think we know even more clearly than before that it's going to be run their way. There might be some collaboration. They might be open to some ideas, but I think at the end of the day, they have their flow of information, they have their process, and they want whoever's in that seat to kind of go about the business in that manner, I think. And Pedro says...
You're right. You're absolutely right.
Pedro says the guy in that seat could possibly be Benji Gill. Haven't heard his name mentioned much in the mix. Did an amazing job as Mexico's manager in the WBC, fluent in Spanish, was involved in a star-studded coaching staff in Anaheim the past 2 years. From Tijuana, went to high school at Castle Park, so strong local ties there. Seen a couple fans. I don't know if anybody, of the insiders have mentioned his name, but he seems like a type that could be a good fit. But how does he? What kind of flow of information and process does Benji like? Because if it's not the right one, good luck.
I like that idea a lot, actually. You're right. He did a fantastic job. Good call, Pedro, in the WBC, taking Mexico farther than anybody thought they'd be able to go. And what did those players do? And by the way, WBC, you're going to have superstars. Randy Rosarena certainly qualifies on that list. And they played with joy, and they played probably as a team. It was one of those, the sum of the parts is greater than the individual parts together. I don't even know how that phrase is supposed to go, but you know what I mean? Like the collective is better than just every part if you took them individually. They played really well as a team. And again, it's that small sample size thing where you're talking about, sure, you can catch lightning in a bottle. Can you do it over a 162 game season? But I love the way that he had those guys playing baseball. And that might be exactly what they need, that something like that kind of thing to happen in San Diego.
Hey guys, how much input do you think AJ's going to go with the star players? How much do you think he's going to reach out to Machado and Tatis and let their voice be heard in his next managerial candidate? Being as we keep talking about having a manager that will take AJ's information, but also accept AJ's information in ways, but also, handle these egos on this team and set the clubhouse that works for them.
I don't think this should ever have to be said, but apparently with AJ, it has to be said.
Yeah.
You talk to your superstars. Yeah. That's every professional sports franchise worth their salt gets input from the superstars. That's just what you do. You talk to your best players. They got to talk to Manny. What are you looking for? Talk to Toddy, talk to you, talk to Joe, talk to Xander. What are you looking for? What helps you in a skipper? And you try and find guys with those kinds of traits. That's just, you have to, unless you want to start alienating your clubhouse, you have to get input from your superstars. That happens in the NBA, the NHL, the NFL. It happens literally everywhere with decent organizations.
Yeah.
Another interesting thing that came out was, all so much of the reporting that we heard in September was, AJ gripping the wheel too tight, too involved. And then what did he say? Maybe I wasn't involved enough this past year, a couple years, and that was part of the problem. 2020, we did great. It was COVID. I had nothing else to do but be around, and we need to get back to that. So,
hey, the point's over there. He missed it completely. It's good Lord. And by the way, it was the 2020 trade deadline where we did all that meddling that probably short-circuited a lot of that.
Yeah, and, he said 2021, I thought we had things in place. They weren't there. And, we know what happened with Tingler. And he said he took a step back out of respect for Bob Melvin, but maybe lesser so than, what had been.
Here's because in 2022, he probably did. And then I'm going on pure speculation mode here, but it does kind of make sense. 2022 takes a step back. Lets Bob Melvin do his thing. Padres go to the National League Championship Series. AJ then says, we're one step away. Let me dive back in here because I can be the difference that gets us all the way into the World Series to a championship. And that's when things go haywire.
Yeah.
I'd believe anything.
That sounds right. So that was troubling to I think some people who feel like he needs to kind of stay away a little bit. And I think it's whoever's taking that job, they know. I mean, they're going to be dealing with AJ pretty closely, and it's going to be a lot of communication. And so you better be ready for that. Let's get to this Ken Rosenthal comment that he made on the Fair Territory podcast that's got a lot of people's attention. Ken was pretty fired up.
Your manager go to the Giants, a division rival, because your relationship with him was, guess what? Unfixable. You let him go without compensation after 2 seasons, the first of which ended with an appearance in the NLCS. And now you're going to be hiring your 6th manager in 10 years. 6th. I will tell you, folks, most GMs don't get nearly that many. So enough of the kumbaya in San Diego. It was not kumbaya in San Diego. And you know what? That story we wrote, Dennis and I, we should have gone even stronger.
How about that?
Could he have gone stronger?
I'm ready for the follow-up part 2. Even
that's
stronger.
What I'm curious about. Yeah. Do we get another piece from the Athletic?
Yeah.
That's the question I have is, could he have gone strong? Were they holding back? Like, is there more information there at their fingertips right now that they can go ahead and write something stronger? Or do they wish they had gone a little bit deeper and found more dirt and found more information? I'd like to know what exactly that means.
Yeah. Sounds like they maybe had more that, are you comfortable reporting this? And maybe they do look more closely at some of the stuff they heard, but didn't feel like they had enough to really go on. But interesting, Ken Rosenthal, you don't hear him speak that passionately all that often. And not a surprise to me that, a legacy baseball guy would feel that way about Bob Melvin, who, we talk about how well respected and how well liked he is. And so maybe there's kind of the personal side of it as well coming out a bit there from Ken Rosenthal, but very interesting.
Yeah. And I think there is also some credibility to the one reason why he's so fired up is he and Dennis Lin did some real reporting on that story and talked to people in the game. Both those guys are proven reporters and journalists and wouldn't put that story together without it being sourced and verified. And once they published that story, the reaction from the Padres was to try to discredit that story and not acknowledge that story, and then tried to all their actions in the offseason tried to make it seem like that was all BS and not really happening. And those reporters have now been verified. So I understand a little bit of, oh, really? You think we have something now? We got more for you in store. There's definitely something to that.
Yeah, and you know what, if he does it, then more power to him. You know, although at this point it might also kind of come across as sour grapes. But even if it does, who gives a damn? You know, if you know something and you can verify it or confident enough in doing it, go for it. I also think a lot of Padres fans are probably still upset with Ken about the whole Max Scherzer thing. You know, like, oh, really, you know something here now. You know, but this one, hey, I think, you know what? This probably gets him back on level playing field here in San Diego. I'm going to let you guys finish this up. I'm going to go talk to the Aztec basketball team.
All right.
The Mountain West Conference Championship rings tonight.
Let's go.
So I got to get out of here and go hit a deadline. But it's always good talking baseball with you guys. Let me know how this thing ends.
Will do. Right. You can find it in your podcast app later today.
Yeah, but then I got to fast forward like 40 minutes. It's a lot of effort.
It is.
You're our starting pitcher. We're going to close out the game for you, dude.
All right, just don't bring in Hader.
Give high fives to Lamont Butler for us.
That's a good dude right there, man. That's a really good dude. I like talking to him.
Yeah, no doubt. Enjoy.
Right, see you, fellas.
See ya. Yeah, I think, Todd, a couple things as we kind of wind down. I do think the kind of might be putting it strongly, but anti-media, sentiments from Preller on October 4th rub people the wrong way. When these are diligent, hardworking, responsible reporters, that wasn't a cool way to handle that. And so I could see if there's some frustration there. And one thing I mentioned to you after we heard from AJ yesterday was, you don't get the sense that he thinks it's strange or weird at all that he's cycling through managers like this. He talks about it very casually, like, I'm trying to think of something you do every couple of years, like you're detailing your car or something, or, or changing up the finance on your getting a better rate in your house or something like that. Like, oh no, it's just something that you do, and every couple of years you try and improve, try and make it a little bit better. But it's like, no, that's not like, he's just very casual about, he's not casual about getting it right. But whenever people push him about like, hey, now 4 whatever full-time managers that you've hired, she's like, oh yeah, we like to get talented people and blah 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 blah. But I'm sure he probably speaks about it differently, and if you got his innermost thoughts, maybe he views it in a different light. But when you hear from him, it's just like, oh no, this is like a normal thing. This happens in all organizations. And I just find that a little bit strange. And I think now we're probably at a point where this would have to be the last. I would think this would have to be the last, especially. And this is why I kind of said what I said about just go all in on AJ, empower him, because then you leave no doubt. And it's not that I necessarily think that's like the smartest thing, but that makes it pretty clear, sink or swim, who gets credit and who's at fault.
100% on all those things. He's almost kind of like he's removed from the process almost when he talks about it. He's like, we hired a manager, we hired another manager. Whereas most GMs that would impact them emotionally, and you would get some emotion and some passion behind their statements about it. But he seems like disconnected from having to hire another manager. And as I told you previously on the pod, I embrace your all in. Embrace AJ. If you're going to ride with AJ Preller as your general manager and you want him giving the manager advice and you want things done his way, then hire a manager that will totally go 100% AJ Preller, and you're going to sink or swim this season. That's kind of how I feel. I agree with you. Hey, did you see this comment from Gustavo about the the payroll situation. We're hearing
Yes.
more and more of that in the last coming days about the debt ceiling rules and how the Padres have to trim salary. I think it's like 8. Your debt can't be 8 times your earnings, something like that. And if they're going to fall in line with MLB's debt ceiling, then they do have to shed payroll, and they have to shed a lot. So this roster could look very different. I know we played our who stays, who goes games, but this could be some players going and not much coming back if you're really trying to get down to 200 million.
Yeah, a couple quick thoughts. There was a report out of New York, Andy Martino, if I have that name right, that there's been talks between the Yankees and the Padres, preliminary early talks about a Juan Soto trade. But these discussions happen. So hard to know how much to put into that, but that is at least a possibility that a trade could happen. Kevin Acee reported that it was believed that Bob Melvin's preference was to trade Juan Soto, which obviously rubbed some fans the wrong way, but would lend credence to the thought that, maybe there's too many stars around and, get some guys that don't want to operate in a certain way, don't want to hit a certain place in lineup, don't have kind of big contract issues and whatnot around. So some interesting things and some very important questions that they're going to have to answer. But would a Juan Soto trade shock anybody at this point? I don't think so. And one last comment from Lauren. If I'm dreaming for a manager, I'd love to see Schumacher, Barajas, Rod Barajas, of course, an interim after Andy Green, Kim Ng come in a group. If I'm being more realistic, it's probably Schilt, who wants a position, cooperated with AJ Preller, and isn't a hot name. And according to AC and Lynn, the talks with Schilt and Flaherty have begun. So the wheels are turning.
Yeah, I think it's Mike Schilt unless something changes drastically, and we'll see what happens. I don't think that's a hire that gets Padre fans super excited. I don't think that's a hire that really changes the needle all that much, because ultimately, as you've heard me say many times on this podcast, it's about the players. They have to play better. If they don't play better in next season, it doesn't matter who the manager is.
I'm sure we'll have much to discuss next week. Maybe we'll have a new manager to discuss. I wouldn't be surprised at this point. Things could move quickly.
A Zoom presser. That's all I want is a Zoom presser with the new manager.
Already had enough of those. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.